If you missed the earlier welcome, you're at the right place. You're at the workshop for Keys to Living a Happy and Healthy Life with Dr. Robert Waldinger. I'm thrilled to open this workshop today. If you're just joining us, please feel free to pop into the Q&A section and tell us where you're Zooming from, so we have a sense of where you're coming from. We've got people from North Carolina, DC, Boston, Newton, Tulsa, Oklahoma, all over the country, which is one of the silver linings to our recent unpleasantness. The pandemic is that everyone has learned Zoom and we can communicate on a whole different level. So I'm going to officially start the workshop. I want you to know that we are recording today. And if you or a friend of yours has perhaps not been able to attend, we will share the recording with everyone. By now, you probably know the rules of Zoom, and I'm just checking my technology because apparently I'm not able to move my slides for some reason. So let me do this manually. Okay, so for those of you who don't know Zoom, you're all on mute, but questions are our jam. We want questions. We're going to leave plenty of time afterwards. So now start popping your questions in for Dr. Waldinger on the Q&A. Also we want questions on how to improve. So we have just started doing Zoom presentations since last April. So any questions you have on how we can improve this or topics you'd like to hear, we'd like to know about that too. So today I am thrilled to have Dr. Robert Waldinger here. He is professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School, director of the Harvard Study for Adult Development, author of Psychiatry for Medical Students and Effective Psychotherapy with Borderline Patients Case Studies. He is co-founder of the Lifespan Research Foundation. We're going to hear more about that later in the program. He is a wealth of information and has great insights. My role is I'm Vice President of Marketing for the Riverwoods Group. We are Northern New England's largest family of nonprofit continuing care retirement communities. And if you don't know what a continuing care retirement community is, I can tell you that in a few seconds. We have 3 different locations, all in New Hampshire: Riverwoods Exeter, which has 3 separate communities, Riverwoods Manchester, and Riverwoods Durham. We welcome independent adults who are 62 years or better to come into our community, live there, enjoy the life and the amenities, and then as you age, if you need healthcare, we offer assisted living, skilled nursing, and memory care, all within the same community at a fraction of the cost. A continuing care retirement community is a nonprofit. We are actually an insurance product. So we look like a great real estate decision, but we are regulated by the state of operation. And basically we guarantee to provide your housing and nursing needs for the rest of your life, no matter what. The government considers that you are prepaying for your eventual need. So a portion of what you pay us, both an entrance fee and monthly fee, is tax deductible. And it's a lifestyle choice. You get to live independently, free of home maintenance, and you have access to fabulous programs and opportunities and fitness classes and transportation and a lot of increased social options, which we all know after the pandemic is really important for our health. And most importantly, in my opinion, you stay in control of your life. So you know, if and when you ever need care, you know where you're going to get it, who's going to provide it, what it's going to cost, and you have guaranteed private rooms in our community when you get to healthcare. A little plug, I have just started a new podcast called Seniority Authority. If you are interested in how to live a healthier life, feel free to download it, subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite platform. There you will find an interview that I did with Dr. Waldinger, along with a bunch of other things. So we are trying to answer questions about aging, all different kinds of questions. So that's another opportunity to learn. And our tagline is to get smarter about growing older. And that's what we're all trying to do here today. So those are a couple of preliminary things. Now let's get to our main topic. Dr. Waldinger, as you saw in the introduction, is a triple Harvard. He went to Harvard, he went to Harvard Graduate School, and he is now founder of and director of the Harvard Study for Adult Development. He is most widely known for his TED Talk. You might have seen on the results of the world's most comprehensive longitudinal study of adults, which is still going on after 83 years. And he has been the one who has driven the assimilation of all of these results and data and statistics into some understandable framework for us to implement in our life. He is also beginning a study of the more than 2,000 children of these participants. And we have a lot of people Zooming in today from all over the country. So I want to just get started with our conversation with Dr. Waldinger and ask, how did you start assimilating the results of the Grant and Gluck study? Can you tell us what that's all about? How did you start that?
Sure. First, Kathleen, thank you for the introduction. And it's really great to be here and to be part of this community, even briefly. One thing I do want to say, you had said that I was the founder of this study, but the study,
you're much too young.
the study started in 1938 and I wasn't around. Yes. But yeah, so I'm the fourth director. And yes. So your question is, how did we pull these findings together, or what would you like?
So the question is, I thank you for that really important clarification. Why was this first study started? Yes, way back? What was the goal of even getting these people? And tell us a little bit about who they chose.
Yes. So there are these were two separate studies, and they didn't even know about each other's existence, even though they were both started at Harvard, because Harvard's a big place with many different schools. So the first study was at Harvard University Health Service. So it's where Harvard undergraduates would go to get their health care. And one of the physicians there was interested in how people successfully moved from adolescence into young adulthood. Mm-hmm. How do you negotiate that life transition? So he wanted to study health. And he said there's been so much emphasis on what goes wrong in human growth and development. Let's study what goes right. So when he thought about studying what goes right in human development, he decided to study all Harvard undergraduates, all men, and all white people. Now, today we would say, well, that's not okay, that human life is so much more diverse. But back then, that was what he decided to focus on. So the college deans chose young men who they thought were fine, upstanding specimens, and nominated them for the study. And the young men and their parents had to agree. And they were signed up for the study and went through a whole series of interviews and medical examinations. That was the first. That was the first study. The next one started almost at the same time. Was started by a Harvard Law School professor, Sheldon Gluck, and his wife, Eleanor Gluck, who was a social worker. And the Glucks were interested in the question of juvenile delinquency. And their particular question was, how is it that some children who grow up in really difficult environments, in families plagued by multiple problems, not just poverty, but mental illness and drug abuse and domestic violence, how is it that some of those children are able to stay out of trouble, are able to stay on a good path? And so they were also interested in healthy development, but the healthy development of children who started out with 3 strikes against them. And so the two studies were going on separately. And then my predecessor, George Valiant, combined those studies in the early 1970s. He
Oh,
said,
I didn't realize they were both started in Harvard. So that's fascinating. Okay. And with
And-
2 different goals.
2 different goals. And the good thing about it is 2 very different samples. So we have this very privileged sample of Harvard College undergraduates, and we have this very underprivileged, disadvantaged sample of inner city Boston boys, most of whom were from immigrant families.
Mhm.
So again, no people of color in those inner city sample, but it is because the city of Boston was more than 97% white in 1938. Now, of course, it's very different, but the waves of migration didn't come until after World War II.
Okay. Okay. That's fascinating. And it's great that they combined them. And you came along, when you came along, you were able to synthesize your predecessor brought the 2 studies together, and then under your role, you really synthesized the results of these 2 studies.
Yes.
And how that must have been extremely difficult. Did you expect to find such similarities in the 2 studies?
We found both similarities and differences. Both of them were big. So similarities because it's all a study of human beings and human lives. And one of the things that I am so impressed with, having followed these very different lives for decades, is how much in common we have. The human experience going through the life cycle has so much in common, no matter who we are, where we live. Even our gender. So one of the things I know, Kathleen, but I want to say for our audience is that we first brought in the wives. When I joined the study in 2003, we started out with a study of marriage in late life. And so we, for the first time, brought in the wives of our original study men. And then we've studied their children. So, and more than half of the children who participated with us are women. Thank goodness. So we're now not an all male study. That's no longer the case. And then what I did was not only to pull together the findings that existed, but we collected data using new instruments, new ways of knowing, new ways of finding out about life. So if you think about it, in 1938, there were basically questionnaires and interviews. Most things happened with pen and paper.
Mm-hmm.
When I started, they had never even been audio taped. And so I brought in videotape. We videotaped couples talking to each other in their 70s and 80s about their biggest worry. We drew blood for DNA. And if you think about it, DNA wasn't even conceived of in 1938. And here we were measuring DNA in 2003.
That's incredible.
And now we're measuring even more sophisticated biological markers of well-being that didn't exist 20 years ago when I started with the study. So we're changing our methods.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways you can look at our study as a history of research methods and how they change. But we're studying the same big things. We're studying well-being, happiness. We're studying work life. mental health, physical health, home life, relationships. So we're studying all the same things they studied in 1938, but adding all kinds of different ways of studying them.
That's incredible. I mean, it's an incredible opportunity to examine a multitudes of lifespans and go after a lot of very dense data. So I know all the people zooming in want to know, okay, what are the results of the study? Tell us what you found out.
Many of the results will not surprise this community. So there's a great quote I like from somebody who lived beyond the age of 100. She said, "Take care of your body as though you're going to need it for 100 years." And what we found in our study is the things you would expect, that taking care of yourself physically makes a huge difference in how well you grow older and in how long you live. And so what does that mean? It means, if you can, not smoking cigarettes, not abusing alcohol. Moderate alcohol use is okay, but alcohol abuse breaks down the body. Not abusing drugs, not smoking. Smoking cigarettes really cut down the lifespan in our participants.
And there was a lot of smoking going on back then.
Lots of smoking. The US government provided free cigarettes for soldiers.
I know.
I mean,
they had doctors who were, advertising certain brands of cigarettes.
Yes. So what we found was, if you didn't smoke, you had a big advantage. Another thing, as you can imagine, is that getting regular exercise makes a big difference in how well you how you stay healthy. So the diseases of aging that most of us get eventually come on later, or not at all for some of us, if we get regular exercise. So all of that, again, no surprise to this group of people. But I think what's helpful is that we have data. There's science behind this. It's not just my opinion, or your mother's opinion about you should eat right and get exercise, and right. There's real science behind this, and it's not just our study, but many studies. And then there is a surprising finding that I talked about in my TED Talk. And we started finding this really a while ago, in the late 1980s, and then we've been finding it ever since. That finding is that our relationships with other people, both the breadth of our social connections, how many people we see in a week or a month, and the quality of those relationships, the warmth of our relationships, that those relationships keep us healthier and help us live longer. And that's the finding that at first we didn't believe. So, again, everybody
very unscientific seeming,
It's very unscientific. Like, well, okay, yeah, we should all have friends and we should all have warm family relationships. It all sounds very nice. But really, it actually increases your longevity. It might make you less likely to get type 2 diabetes or arthritis. How could that possibly be? And what we found, first of all, was that other research groups began finding the same thing. And that's really important, because we are just one study of a few thousand people, and no one study of this kind proves anything. So what you want is to have different studies by different researchers pointing in the same direction. And starting in the late 1980s, many different studies began to find similar things. That people stayed healthier and lived longer if they had more and better relationships with other people, if they were not socially isolated, if they were not lonely. So that's what we found. And then, do you want me to say a little bit about what we're learning about how it works?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so then the question naturally is, well, how could this be? How could my friendly relationship with you, Kathleen, get into my body and help prevent diabetes. How could that possibly happen? Right? Crazy.
It
So
doesn't seem to make sense.
it doesn't make sense. So we're studying the mechanisms by which mind and body are connected. And
Mhm.
specifically, we're studying stress. The idea that all of us face stress every day.
Yeah.
Something upsets you or frightens you, and you can feel your heart rate increase, and you can, feel your breathing get a little faster. That's normal. One of the things that we began to study was how warm relationships, help us calm down when we're stressed. So if you think about it, when you've had an upsetting conversation or you've had a bad day and you talk to somebody you trust and they're a good listener and a sympathetic listener, you can literally feel your body calm down.
That is true. That
Yeah.
is absolutely true.
And that's the way the body is supposed to work. So we are supposed to have a physical response to stress because it helps us run away if we're being, accosted by a dangerous animal, or it helps that, so there are good things about that, but then you want to be able to calm down. Chronic stress where we don't ever quite calm down, is what we believe breaks down the body very slowly. So the idea is that if you are chronically stressed, if you never quite come back to your regular calm baseline, then it sets up all kinds of chemical reactions in the body. It sets up chronic inflammation, higher levels of the hormone cortisol circulating in the bloodstream. And those things affect many body systems. So they can affect your joints and your coronary arteries, and they can affect your pancreas and your diabetes. So what we believe, and we're finding more evidence for it, is that chronic stress, where you don't calm down ever completely, is toxic to the body. And that relationships, when they're good, help us calm down, help us come back to that normal baseline that we all want to come back to.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. And, when you connect warm relationships helping to reduce stress, and we know that fight or flight syndrome, but I think what you're saying is this study proved that the antidote to that is human connection with other people.
Yes.
And that also affects the body just as much as the fight or flight syndrome.
Yes. There's a great experiment that a psychologist named James Cohen did, where he had people go through a stressful medical procedure, and he had them do it not too stressful, but some stress, like maybe a scan of some kind.
Okay.
And he had some people go through it alone. Some people go through it holding the hand of a complete stranger. And some people go through it holding the hand of someone they loved. And what he found was what you would expect, that actually the response to going through a procedure alone was some stress. That the response to even holding the hand of a stranger was less stressful. And that the least stressful response was holding the hand of someone close to you.
Wow.
And what he estimated was that holding the hand of someone close to you while you, say, are in an MRI scanner is the equivalent of administering a mild anesthetic.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow, this is powerful.
Yeah.
This is extremely powerful, because it says to me that maintaining friendships and connections is as important as maintaining your body and maintaining exercise.
Absolutely.
And so I know the next question that's on everyone's mind is, what does this mean in terms of if I'm married or partnered or single, does this mean if I'm single that I will not experience that and that I'll have chronic stress versus if you're partnered up, you won't. Can you comment on that?
Yes, it
For us
doesn't.
single people?
It doesn't mean that. So headline news. It does not mean that you have to be married or partnered to get the benefits. Not at all.
That's good.
Not at all. What
Now
it means,
explain that.
well, right. So because if you think about it, you could talk to a friend and feel that calming response in the body, right?
Mhm.
You don't need a marriage license for that, right? So what it means is that our connections and even our casual connections help us feel better. So if you think about it, the person who's in the checkout line at the grocery store, who you always see because she checks out your groceries, and you smile and you exchange a few words, that actually has a kind of warming effect physically. I've become like buddies with my postman, the postal carrier who delivers my mail, because now I'm home because of the pandemic. And so, and what they've found is that even casual ties, let alone friendships, that those all help us to stay healthier as well as happier. So no, you do not need to be partnered for this to work.
In fact, sometimes if you are partnered with the wrong person, that could create
Yeah.
more stress.
Yes, a really acrimonious partnership, a partnership where you're fighting and angry all the time is not good for your health. There's research that shows that. And so what we try to do in helping people is to suggest ways that they can help diminish conflict. So it's not like if you have a really conflictual relationship, you should just get out. No, that's not usually the case. Sometimes it is, but more often than not, it's getting help. That there are counselors who are really good at helping people find better ways to be together, so they argue less and they enjoy each other more.
Mhm. And then that warming response happens and calms the body down from this chronic stress that in our lifetimes with our schedules and things and demands just escalating faster and faster, we live in a very stressful life. People
Absolutely.
trying to balance marriage and children and work and parents and the rest of that, it can be hard.
Absolutely.
Now, I know that there are people zooming in now who are concerned because they are introverts and they're saying, I like being alone. I get stressed when I walk into a room with a lot of people, when I'm in awkward social situations. What would the recommendation be for them to connect in a way that could be helpful?
Yes, that's a really good point, that we're all somewhere on a spectrum from super extroverted to super introverted, and that's not a problem being introverted. Um, that in fact, as you were suggesting, if I'm an introvert, if I'm more of a shy person, it means that I don't want to be around a lot of people, and that being around a lot of people causes my body to react with stress, right?
Mhm. Yes.
So it doesn't mean that one formula fits everybody. If you're an introvert, that's not a problem as long as you have one or two people who you feel close to, who you feel have your back. It may be that all you need is one person who you can call up when you're having a hard time. So it does not have to be, you don't have to be the belle of the ball, or the life of the party,
Mhm.
in order to get the benefits that we're talking about.
I love that because it's not prescriptive and it says create warm relationships and you decide how many you need. And what I also hear you saying is that you need some good friends, like one or two, you need people that you can really go to at a time of stress, but that also there's another level of casual connections, just friendly, casual connections. The postman, the dry cleaner, the checkout person, the barista, that also provides another level. So there's almost like two levels. One is a very deep level. If you are having a really hard day, who do you pick up the phone and call? And then there's another more casual, being connected in the world level of friendship.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's important that we don't minimize the importance of these casual connections. And actually, that's one of the things that probably is so useful about a community like Riverwoods, where people have some people that they get close to, but many people they say hi to and have a casual chat with, right? Those that has benefits. Uh, and I think that one of the things that becomes more stressful is social isolation. And that when people
Yes.
are more isolated than they want to be, when they are lonely, that's a stressor, and that breaks down our health and as well as our mental health. So it's trying to find ways not to become more isolated than you want to be.
And I definitely anecdotally feel that I have seen people age much, much more significantly this year than in other years because of the isolation. And it's just all anecdotal. I don't know if your team is following that, the impact of COVID.
We're about to reach out to the second generation, the children who we've studied already, 1,300 of them, and we're about to reach out to them again. And some of our questions are going to be, how has it been for you during COVID?
Mhm.
What have been some of the effects for you? And what we expect to find is that it will be very different for different people. You know, as we know, some people actually have confessed that they kind of enjoyed not the pandemic itself, of course, but that they kind of enjoyed the staying at home
Mhm.
and maybe not commuting to work, maybe getting to know their neighborhood a little better, right? And they often will
Absolutely.
confess this with some guilt, because how could I enjoy this when, of course, the world is in so much trouble? But what, again, one of the things I learned through my research is one size never fits all. One
Mhm.
reaction never applies to every person. And the same is with the way we encounter the pandemic. So I'm sure that some people have had a harder time emotionally and physically because of the pandemic, and some people have done well, done
Mhm.
fine.
And you're right. It's another way to kind of go deeper and get to know other people. Um, the one I think question that's probably on everyone's mind is, how does social media fit into this? And how does that, being, and I have two-part question. One is um, kind of latent social media, when you are on Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat and you're doing things and commenting, versus Zooming and seeing people in FaceTime, um, in live uh, in live situations. Do you have any thoughts on how that impacts the chronic stress factor to our body? Does it help or hurt?
Yes. That's the answer. But so first of all, we have a huge amount to learn still about
Yeah.
how social media is affecting us, shaping our health, shaping our psyches, our well-being. But the reason I said yes is that one of the things we know is that some people find social media to be exhilarating. I get to Zoom with my grandchildren. I get to be in touch after 60 years with a group of elementary school friends that I was never in touch with before. I mean, how wonderful is that, right? So some people are finding social media to be a wonderful new way to connect with people. Other people are finding social media to be a source of emotional pain and worry.
Mhm.
So it's possible, especially teenagers do this.
Yeah.
Some, not all, but you can look at social media and look at all the things we put out there. You know, we curate our lives. I mean, we put up pictures of a delicious meal we had at a restaurant, or pictures of ourselves on a beautiful beach, right? And you would think that's all we did all day long, is went to
Mhm.
beautiful
Oh,
beaches and
yeah.
ate
That's all I
fabulous.
do.
Yeah, exactly. So we don't post, I don't post the picture of myself when I wake up feeling lousy in the morning, right? Or
Or
so
taking out the garbage.
exactly. So what happens then is that it's easy to imagine that everybody else is living a perfect life. Everybody else is living a great life except me. And that can be really hard. It's easier, I think, as we're older and we sort of realize, wait, we've never met anybody who has a perfect life. But especially when you're a teenager, when you're younger, you just don't know. And
Mhm.
so if you find yourself comparing yourself to others and feeling like you don't measure up, or you're not having the life you should, often that kind of comparison is false, because you're comparing. There's a saying that I really like. We're always comparing our insides to other people's outsides.
Oh,
We're always,
that is really true.
yeah,
If we're comparing how we feel to way others are pictured.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. So that's one way in which we need to be really careful of how we encounter social media. And so one litmus test, I think, so each of us can test this for ourselves. If you spend time on your favorite internet outlet,
Mhm.
let's say you try spending, 20 minutes or a half an hour, do you come away feeling more energized, more upbeat, or do you come away feeling worse, feeling a little more down? That's a really good test. And that can tell you something about how much time you want to spend in that way.
I love that. Very, very practical solution that everyone can do today is to examine yourself. Do this, and I'm going to call it a Harvard provided test. You too can conduct this Harvard study at home on your own
You're really
by spending 20 minutes on social media and then seeing how you feel, and let that be your guide. What I love about this study is that, and what it says about the keys to a long and happy and healthy life, is you have the ability to change your behavior now for the future. And you have your ability to stop smoking, moderate alcohol and drugs, and get more exercise, and be focused on your friendships and your connections, and realize that's important. That's not frivolous. That's why we're here, and can make us healthier.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
enormous.
Yeah.
I want to leave time for questions, because I know we have questions that are starting to pop into the Q&A. So please, if you're thinking of questions, pop them in. But I also want to ask you, what's next for the study, and what's next for, can you tell us a little bit about Lifespan
Yeah.
Research Foundation, and
Yeah.
what's, because we're not done yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what we did, so, I gave that TED talk and it went viral. And why did it go viral? Like, 38 million people have watched it. Like, that's crazy.
I
And
know.
what we came to understand was that people want to know more about what's normal in life, what happens to people as they go through life, what happens to lots of people, and so we started the Lifespan Research Foundation. It's a nonprofit, and basically the goal is to bring the findings from this research into a usable, easy to understand form for people, because we've been publishing really technical papers in journals, academic journals, that nobody reads. So we're trying to bring this out into the world. And so what
I
we've
love that.
done, as you know, Kathleen, we've created a program we're calling Roadmaps for Life Transitions. And it's essentially like a life checkup where you, with a small group of people, you go through a set of kind of sessions where you learn about the research findings about our life stages and how they affect our view of life, on how we define values and purpose as we get to different points in our lives, about our relationships and how to make them the way we want them, about life transitions and how we meet them, about challenges in relationships and how we can meet challenges. So all of that in this program, in this Roadmaps program, we're just bringing it out into the world. So it's a kind of hope to take this research that we've spent, the government has spent millions of dollars on this research. So we feel an obligation to bring this, and yes, of course, it's influenced many other scientists and lots of our thinking about well-being, but we also want to bring it directly to people in a form that we hope will be both interesting and useful. So that's what we're doing.
I love that, and I have looked at the roadmap. I think it is extraordinary, because what you're doing is you are taking these years of research, decades of research, and making it accessible to anyone that wants to do this. Is to say, we will do this and we will guide you. So these sessions that you have are guided by a professional facilitator and backed by research, and I'm all about what can you practically do to change your life right now.
Yeah.
And I think that's wonderful. We will be including, we'll be talking more about Lifespan Research Institute. And if you are interested in learning more, you can put your email address in the Q&A and we will connect you with Dr. Waldinger and make sure you know what they are doing. It's Lifespan Research Foundation that's doing this. So it's a great next step, I think. And you've just piloted it. So it's not quite out yet, but in the works.
Yep. Yeah. It'll be out this summer and fall. We'll start. Yeah.
That's really exciting. I want to go to some of our questions because we have a good number of them. The first question came in prior to the program even starting. And the question is, I've read your book, Adaptation to Life, that was published in 1976 about the study, and have the findings changed since that book was published?
Yes and no. So yes, of course, the findings have changed in part for the reason I said, that we brought in so many new ways of measuring human life, right? Biological tests and videotaping and all kinds of things. But in some ways, they have not changed. In some ways, what that book showed us was that the way we cope with challenges, the way we conduct our relational life, both at work and at home, that those are vitally important. And so in its essence, the findings haven't changed. In some of the details, they have changed. The other thing we've found, which may be of interest to this group, is that the inner city men died much earlier than the original Harvard men. So the inner city men, on average, died 10 years earlier than the Harvard men. And we think that's because of the difference in access to healthcare, in access to health information, which the Harvard men began to get in the 70s. When they were in their 50s, they began to understand more, because it was in the media that exercise and not smoking and not abusing alcohol, that these were profoundly important. And we think that the inner city men may have had less access because they didn't have the same educational backgrounds.
Mhm.
And so one of the things we're very impressed by is this issue of disparities in healthcare, in income, and how important it is for us to pay attention to that in our, in our political life,
Right.
really, because it translates into how healthfully you live and how long you live.
And that connects to another question that's come up, which is what are the differences in the findings between the more and less privileged group? So that was essentially the differences. Are you saying that the less privileged group died 10 years earlier, and it could
Yes.
be access to information and access to healthcare? Would it be that,
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
Those are our hypotheses. We haven't shown that, but that's what we think partly was going on. And then some of the similarities. One of the interesting things we found when we studied the second generation
Mhm.
was that many of the children of the inner city men, most of them moved into the middle class and many upper middle class. And so upward mobility was really possible for the next generation of inner city children. And one of the things we know is that that's in part because those families were all Caucasian. If you were white in the city of Boston, you could buy a home in a good neighborhood. You could buy a home with a decent school system to
Mhm.
send your kids to. And that was much harder for people of color, much less likely. So what we know is that when people are given these opportunities, they can really thrive and better themselves. And so we had many, many families that started out quite impoverished and troubled and moved to much better situations when given the opportunity.
Okay. I have a question. Please tell us about the Invulnerable Children Study. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not, but I can
Okay.
say, I think what our questioner might be
This is
pointing to.
Sally, who
Okay,
asked the question.
okay, thanks, Sally. I'm not sure, Sally, which one you're talking about. That phrase rings a bell, but I will say that there's a theory, and this may be partly what you're pointing to, about children some children are dandelions and some children are orchids. The dandelions can grow anywhere. They can grow in any soil. They can thrive almost in any family. Not quite, but you can live through a lot of adverse circumstances if you're a dandelion child, maybe an invulnerable child, and do okay despite having hardships growing up. There are orchids, on the other hand, who are children who are extremely sensitive and who may have trouble, may need just the right conditions to do okay, and that otherwise may have trouble. And so essentially what these kinds of studies try to understand is how our different biology and our different temperaments that we're born with actually interact with the circumstances into which we're born and the
Oh,
environments we grow up in to determine what we grow into and how we grow and how well we do as we get into adulthood. And so I think the phrase invulnerable child comes from that line of research.
wow. Sally shared more on this. She's been looking to learn more about adult development and aging. She's got a master's from Harvard Public Health and maternal child health and aging. I love this. She's saying as she ages, she's surprised with people telling me, well, of course you will have arthritis if you're 70 years old. I hate that people connect those two. Do you have any comment on that? Of course you've got arthritis if you're 70, or of course you have this, because if you do exercise, we can beat our numerical age, I think.
Well, okay, let me talk about two sides of that.
Okay.
One is the fatalistic side. Well, of course, you're gonna get sick because you're getting older. And that can cause us to give up, right? And not do the things that we can do to keep ourselves healthy. And that's a problem, right? So that, of course, you're gonna have arthritis because you're 70. So just sit down, don't move, give up. No, no, the research doesn't show that at all. On the other side, though, is the idea that we can beat anything, and that if we only do the right stuff, we'll never get arthritis. If we only do the right stuff, we'll never get heart disease, right? That's not true. Aging is real.
Mhm.
Our bodies do become more fragile. It's just the truth. And that one of the things we do want to do is both not give up on ourselves physically, so really take care of ourselves and do what we can, but also don't blame ourselves for the fact of aging and what happens to us as we age. That self-blame, like I really should be in perfect health and I must be doing something wrong. That's a myth. And we
Mhm.
don't want to subscribe to that myth.
Speaking of exercise, I do have a question not quite in your wheelhouse, but it's important. This woman says that I know exercise is important, but I've never been to a gym. I'm over 60. What level of exercise is important?
This is a fabulous question. And I know some answers. So essentially, you don't ever have to go to a gym, first of all. That one of the best forms of exercise is walking. That when they do studies of people, of older adults, who they put some on walking programs, and then some they have do whatever they were doing, mostly being sedentary. And the people who walk have better physical health and they stay sharper cognitively longer. And it's really good, solid research. So what I would say to you is, don't worry if you've never gone to a gym. You don't ever have to. And you don't ever have to learn a sport, and you don't have to like lifting weights. Um, Take a walk. Find a time every day to go. Could be a short walk, could be a longer walk. If you can, walk briskly, but you don't have to walk briskly. The idea is to get your body moving. If you can, get your heart rate up a little bit. And that's all you need to do to get a lot of the benefit that we're talking about with exercise.
That's wonderful. And it's very hopeful because again, it says no matter where you are right now, you can start.
Yeah,
I think some people look back and they say, well, I have all of these years of accumulated bad habits and sedentariness and I can't do it. But
right.
you can hopefully most people can walk, and or get
Yes.
some kind of exercise.
And even if you can't walk, they have chair yoga. They
Yes,
have
yes.
exercise that people can do that's really cool. And
Mhm.
you could look for videos on YouTube. YouTube has everything. And
Yeah.
you can look there are very good videos that can offer you ideas and lead you through exercise, even if you don't walk,
Yeah.
you know?
I have one other question. We're coming up to the hour. With regards to Schrodinger's cat, does involvement in the study itself have an influence on the life of the participants?
Yes, it does. Again, wonderful question. So you're talking about like just the very fact that we observe them and ask them questions causes them to behave differently. And you're right. Um, in fact, a couple of times we asked in our regular questionnaires, how has participating in the study affected you? Some people say it hasn't had any effect. Some people say it's really annoying. You have too many questions. But many people said this has been a profound part of my life, because what it does is every couple of years prompts me to reflect on my life. And the very act of being asked to reflect on my life and write some things down has changed how I think about my life and how I live my life. So your question is right on target. We know that we are affecting the participants we view. They are not sort of laboratory rats, and we're not completely hands off. The other thing is we send them thank you notes. We send them birthday cards. We're not a hands-off study. And the reason we do that is so that people feel like a community, and also so that they recognize they're giving a gift to the world by giving us this information. It's a gift to science and to the study of human life. So we are not hands-off, and that can be argued to be scientifically unsound, and we're willing to take that limitation.
For all of the information that they're giving you.
Yes.
And why wouldn't you want to participate? Okay, I lied. I have one more question that is really important, which I think I know the answer to. I think you do too. While I am over 60, will using our brains more, like learning more languages, keep Alzheimer's away? If we pick up activities like playing guitar that use fine motor skills, will that help arthritis go away?
Yeah. Well, so the answer to both is we don't really know. That some studies suggest that cognitive stimulation, learning new things, challenging your brain helps as you get older, but there's no really good data to say this will prevent cognitive decline. This will prevent Alzheimer's disease. So the bottom line is, like, if you see advertisements for supplements that promise to keep your brain healthy, we don't know anything about that. So don't pay for them. But
Yeah.
and if you want to learn a language, do it. Like if you want to learn to play bridge, do it. But do it because you'll enjoy it. Don't do it if it's a chore, because we're not sure what's involved. What we do believe is that keeping yourself active and alive and stimulated, both socially and intellectually, is more likely to keep your brain healthy than not. And what we do know is it won't hurt you. So that's the best I can say.
And just connected to this, I have worked with another neuropsychologist who says the best thing to do to reduce your chance of Alzheimer's is sleep, exercise, and socialization. So it comes back to the same things, that socialization and connecting with people, reading their face, having these kinds of conversations is better for your brain than a brain game.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been fantastic. I know we could continue for another hour at least I could. I love talking about this, but I am going to get everyone off at 11 o'clock, and I appreciate you, Dr. Waldinger, for being with us. Thank you everyone for Zooming in. If you sent our email, we will get you information to Dr. Waldinger's roadmap plan. And thank you again for helping us understand how to live a happy and healthy life.
It was a pleasure. I really enjoyed it, Kathleen.
I did too. Thank you.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.